Good afternoon. We're learning the laws of Hanukkah, and we're on Tov Reish Ayin Aleph Gimel, which is 671.3 in the Mishnah Brura. So we're going to talk about, the title is, can two people share a menorah? But before that, we're going to talk about a similar case, and then we will get to that question. Ner sheyesh lo shtei pios, a candle or a light which has two openings. We'll describe in a second what that means. Ola lo bishvil shnayim counts as two separate candles, two separate lights. Mishnah Berurah explains, Shtei pios, hainu shehapasilos mibifnim munachim b'ner zeh etzel zeh, rak roshe hapasilos kishabolten lechutz nechlaken l'shtei makamos. So the case is where you have, let's picture a little cup of oil, let's say, of olive oil, and inside the oil there are two wicks that are just basically, or one wick that are attached, and you can't tell which one's apart. But when they come out, there's, let's say, two separate openings, so it looks like two separate candles, even though in the oil itself, the wick you really can't differentiate that there's two wicks, only above. So in that case, that can be used as two candles. So if it's the second night of Hanukkah, you can use that to count for two candles. And he says, even though that in the oil themselves, the wicks are not separated at all, but since above, when they come out of the oil, they are recognizable that it's two separate wicks, therefore it counts as two candles. It counts as two. Mashmil meloshen zeh de afilu lemahadrin haosen ner lekol echad gam ken yoel zeh gam ken lekol echad. He says it sounds like from this also for the mahadrin. If you remember, we mentioned that to fulfill the minimum requirement of lighting the Hanukkah candles, the Hanukkah lights, all one needs to do is to light one candle each night of Hanukkah. That's it. But to do mahadrin min mahadrin, which is the optimum way to do the mitzvah, which is what we do, is that we light each candle every night, and we add a candle each subsequent night until we get to 8 candles the last night of Hanukkah. So he says here that if you have this case where there are two wicks that are separated at the top, even though they're not different, you can't differentiate between them in the bottom, that counts as two separate nights, even for the mahadrin. It says, this could even work for two people. However, look at the Magen Avram. Min habayis tzarich ki im lahadlik neirosav v'makom miyuchad lo yadliku shnei b'nei anashim b'ner echad v'afilu b'layla harishona yesh lizar b'zeh, and even in the first night. So he quotes that one would think, since we said that this counts as two candles, that even two people could light on this with this candle. However, the Magen Avram writes, if you remember earlier, we mentioned a halacha that says that everybody's menorah has to be differentiable. That's not a word. You have to be able to tell the difference between each person's menorah. So in Ashkenazic households where you have many people lighting, you should have the menorah separate so that you can tell each menorah and that each person lit separately. So to have separate people light on this type of candle where you have it connected sort of at the bottom and separated at the top, if you have two people doing that, that doesn't really look like it's two separate people, so that would be a problem. And you shouldn't do that, the Magen Avram writes. However, continues the Mishnah Brura, Ve'efsher, he says, it's possible, dafka ner echad, sheyesh lo rak shtei pios, only our case that we're describing, it's possible that you have to be stringent with two people. Aval b'menorah shalanu sheyesh lahem ches pios, but our menorahs that have 8 openings, right? Each menorah has 8 separate things. Mutter lahadlik shnei b'nei adam zeh b'katza zeh v'zeh b'katza zeh. You're allowed to have two separate people share one menorah if you have one person light on this side and the other person light on that side. Let's say it's the first night of Hanukkah. You could have one guy light over here on the far left and another guy light on the far right. And then it's fine because you can tell that it's two people that lit. How can we tell? Shahari rowan shehedliku shnayim. We see that two people lit. Dim loken hayamadlik keseder echad etzel chaveru. V'chein noagim ha'olam. And this is what people do. Because if it was one person lighting two candles, then he wouldn't put it on two separate sides. He would have lit it next to each other. But since we see a menorah, you have one of these big silver menorahs with 8 things, and you have one candle over there and one candle over there, and it's obvious that two separate people did it, because if it was one person, he would have lit both candles next to each other. So the Mishnah Berurah concludes. He sounds like that. He says v'chein nohag hamol, and this is what people do. If for some reason, it's the first night of Hanukkah and you don't have your own menorah, you can use the other end of someone else's menorah. And so we said that. But in the first case which we mentioned, where it's really just like two wicks that are kind of connected at the bottom and they're really right next to each other, coming out at the top, then that shouldn't be done. Now I guess you could. Mishnah Berurah doesn't say explicitly, but one could wonder what would be like on the third night of Hanukkah. Could I light 3 candles here and the other person light 3 candles there? Is that can a person distinguish enough that it's two separate people lighting? So that's just something to think about. But for sure, like the first night, one could light on this side and one could light on that side. And the idea is that it has to be recognizable that it's two separate menorahs.